Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Marupena Sansitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sansitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstitaha Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So welcome to you all, and again for the Devi chant. We have it now in an electronic version. If you go to the Silent Way website, silentway.org, and go to the current classes page, you will see many of our Sanskrit chants in a digital form at the bottom of that page. And I think it's just called Devi Chant. So you can find it there and download it. And then it has the Devanagari, it has a transliteration, and then it has an English translation underneath that. So we are in our first chapter, and Parashurama has come and met with Dattatreya, and we talked last week about the sequence of practices to be done. So Parashurama first meets Samvarta on the road, who tells him the highest knowledge. Parashurama doesn't get it because his mind is too gross. So he goes to Dattatreya, who says, your mind is too gross, and then gives him upasana, which is preliminary practices. In this case, the preliminary practice is ritual worship of the goddess, probably akin to what we now know as Sri Vidya. And the question was, do you have to do this? Not necessarily. Depends on the subtlety or the grossness of mind of the student. And sometimes upasana or devotion is not the only preliminary practice that works. Sometimes seva, Devoted service is a value. Karma yoga, study of the scripture. There are all sorts of other practices, but we want to see that all these various actions that we do not in and of themselves free us. They serve only to cultivate what we call a sattvic mind, sattvic temperament. How do you know if your mind's becoming sattvic? The frequency and volume of thought has reduced. And when you are taken through the scriptures and introduced to these ideas, they resonate with your own direct experience. So Parashurama has come back, he sees Dattatreya, and he has begun to see that there is no point in acquiring wealth. So doing puja in order to propitiate the gods, to acquire wealth or to get what you want, is pointless. And he wants something richer. He says, Samvarta told me this stuff and I can't remember. I don't understand it. Tell me about it. So that's where we are now. Any questions about what we've covered so far? All right, Punit, sock it to us.
Verse 18. Iti samprartitho datta gururalakshya bhargave yogayatam tripuropastau satriddha bhakti brihitam kramena dikshayamasa tripuro pasti hetave. Oops, I think I read the verse 19 instead of 18. But I'll read.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Did you do the wrong verse?
Yeah, I think I read verse 19 instead, but I'll read the English of 18. Verse 18. I wish to worship that great goddess Tripura. Lord, tell me out of compassion the method of her worship.
Okay, so this is actually in the time before he goes off for the 12 years. Now you just did verse 19?
Yeah.
Now do the English of 19.
Thus prayed for Dattatreya, the Guru, beholding the fitness of Parashurama for the worship of Tripura, grown by his good faith and devotion, formally initiated him into the worship of Tripura in the traditional manner.
Yes. So he is now instructed in the mantras and the yantras, various ritualistic practices which purify the head and the heart. Number 20.
Jamadagyopi samprapya Tripuram dikshanam shubham Sarva diksha samadhikam Purnatattva prabodhanam Mantra yantra vasana bhiriye Ivanta nikhilam kramam Prapya Shri Guru Vakrabha Jadrasam madhukaro yatha Triptan Ranga Anandati Ato Bhargava Vastatha Srinathe Nabhyanugyata Sri Tripura Sadhanodhyatah Parikramya Gurum Natva Mahedri Mupayayau. The son of Jamagni, Parashurama, having obtained the auspicious initiation into the Tripura lore, which surpasses all other initiations and awakens the full and true nature of the initiate, and having got the entire discipline along with the meditative techniques on mantras and yantras, mystical syllables and diagrams, from the lotus-like mouth of the Guru as the bee acquires honey, and with his heart satisfied and intoxicated with bliss, went around the Guru and saluted him. Then Bhargava, Parashurama, permitted by the venerable Guru and intent on the practice of the worship of Tripura, came to the Mahendra mountain.
So he gets his initiation, his diksha. Then he walks around his guru, which is a sign of respect, pranams, goes off and does this practice. Going on, 21.
Tatra nirmaya vasatim shubhamatti sukhavaham abhudupasana paro varshadvadashakam tada. Then, constructing a beautiful and comfortable dwelling there, he became wholly engaged in worship for 12 years.
So here we have again part of the backstory. So Parashurama builds a little hermitage and engages in ritual for 12 years. Does that mean you and I have to do it for 12 years? Might take us 20. Might take us 20 minutes. There's no set time, and again, no specific set practice. This Sri Vidya is a very good one, but there are many other practices. If you want a collection of all the various practices to do, I think for those of us here in the West, men and women of action, go to Gita. You've got 18 different yogas. Each chapter is titled a particular yoga. It'll give you all the practices to purify the head and heart that you need. All right, next one.
Nitya naimiti karparaha puja japa pararayanaha sada Shri Tripure shanya murti dhyanaika tatparaha. He remained devoted to daily and periodical rites, adhering to ritualistic worship and repetition of mantras, and eagerly engaged in the meditation on the form of goddess Tripura alone always.
So his particular upasana is to do these mantras, to do these ritual pujas, and to meditate on the murti, the divine form of Tripuri, the goddess. And again, you can pick any form you wish. It can be Lord Shiva, it can be Lord Krishna, it can be Jesus. You can even use a non-formed notion. God is I don't understand God, to whom it may concern, the ineffable, unknowable God. Doesn't matter. You can even use a non-theistic way, being with your breath. But finding some particular practice. And as thoughts and feelings arise, we set them aside and bring the mind back to our puja, our ritual, our practice, our upasana. Next one.
Evam tasyat yagat kalo dvadashabdo nimeshavat athaikada sukhasino jamdagyo anvichityayat. Thus 12 years of time passed away like a minute for him. Then once sitting comfortably, Parashurama thought as follows.
So he's now developed some subtlety of mind. And because of the subtlety, his mind has now begun to turn inward. And these particular thoughts now arise. Going on.
Pura yat praha sanvatto maya swabhyarthita pati Tanmaya naiva viditma shenapi tadananu. Formerly, after having been defeated in battle by Rama, what sage Samvarta said on being requested by me on the way was surely not at all understood by me then, even partially.
So he remembers the conversation he had with the sage Samvarta. And because at the time his mind was gross, he didn't understand it. But there was some sort of, the word we would use is shaktipat. Comes from the root patpadati, which means to fly or to fall. He was touched in some way by Samvarta, even though he didn't understand what Samvarta said. But it left an impression on his soul. Many of us may have met a great saint, not understood what they said, but we could feel the borrowed glory of their presence. It's touched us. At a later time, our minds return. What did they say? So this is what's happening to Parashurama. Next one.
Visritam cha maya yasmat prangana prishtam guru prati mahatmayam tripura shakte shrutam shri guru vastravatah. Since it was forgotten by me, it was not inquired after before the Guru. The greatness of Goddess Tripura has been heard from the mouth of the Guru.
So he couldn't even remember the questions to ask Dattatreya. Instead, he remembered his ritual, his upasana. But now he's curious. So let's see what he does now that this curiosity has arisen. Going on.
Parantu tanna viditam yat sarvatam. Parantu tanna viditam yat sanvarta pura bravit maya srishti prasangena prishtam kinchit guru prati. But what sage Samvarta told me formerly was not ascertained. Something was asked by me on the topic of creation before the Guru.
So he remembers that he asked him something about creation, but he couldn't even remember his question. And he certainly didn't remember Samvarta's answer. Remember what Samvarta did after he gave him the first answer? He said, I think you should go talk to Dattatreya. So he sent him up the road. Let's see what happens now.
Tada kat krida kyanam varnayatva cha me guruhu nabravit prakritat tanme tatadrisham sthitam. Then, describing the story of the weaver of straw mats, my guru did not say anything on account of its not being the subject in hand. For me, it stood in that manner then.
So the story of the weaver of straw mats. So the idea here is if you weave a straw mat, the mat itself, and even if there's a design in it, you see a picture on the straw mat. But in fact, it comprises. Someone has their mic open and needs to mute themselves. The straw mats, what looks like a picture is really the various threads of the straw mat brought together. Our modern example is if you look at an image on Facebook and you see, let's say it's a a nature scene. What you're actually seeing is pixels. It just looks like a nature scene. Can you all still hear me? Is my connection still on?
You can hear you.
All right, next one.
Lokasya gatimetam tu no janamyapi leshatah kasmadidam sumidatam jagadadambaram mahat. But I do not know this course of the world even a little. From what did this great show of the world arise?
So Samvarta had somehow compared the world to the weaving of a straw mat. And Parashurama just didn't get it. The image did not cause an aha in his mind. So he's still confused. Going on.
Kutra va gachati punaha kutra sansthan mrichati asthiram tu prapashyami sarvam sarvatra kinchana. Where does it go? Again, where does it move into position? But I see everything, whatever, everywhere as inconstant or uncertain.
So one of the things he's begun to realize, he's begun to ask the question, what is this world? How does it come about? What's it made of? Where does it go? Now, last week we talked a bit about where have I placed this text in the pedagogical canon, the series of texts that we study. So we spent quite a bit of time, about a year and a half, doing Viveka Chudamani. And that is focused on discrimination between the self and the not self. And if we've been thorough in that, most of us should get a sense, oh, I am that pure awareness. I'm not the body, not the mind, not the intellect. And we may think, oh, that's all there is to it. And the tradition says, no. What we've been calling the not self is Saguna Brahman. It's the self too. So we're beginning our study into what is this phenomenal world. Why should we do this? First of all, so we know the truth. But secondly, if we have a very deep meditation and we find great peace in our own meditation, but we come out and the politics upsets us, and the economy upsets us, and my family upsets me, and other things in the world upset me. Why is it that the world continues to upset me? Because I do not know what the world is. In ignorance, I think the world is other than me. And it's solid and real, substantial. Most importantly, joy causing and misery producing. And this particular scripture, building on the stuff we learned in Mandukya Upanishad, has as its intention a clear understanding of what is this world. So this is the question that Parashurama is asking. What is this world? How has it come about? He says, I see its impermanence. Nothing seems to last. What's really going on? Is nihilism the highest philosophy? The world's vain, the world's empty. Let's have more wine, smoke a little more dope, start shooting heroin because it's just all empty and meaningless. No. All right, next one.
Vyavahara sthya prayaha kasmadetadapidrisham chitram jagadvaya vrihatim prapashyamya ya vimshrimnam jagat prapashyamya vimrishinim. When is it so? The affairs of the world are nearly fixed. For what reason is this so? I see the deeds of the world bereft of deliberation as surprising.
So he's used this word vyavahara, and I think it's also a word in Hindi. It means business in Hindi, does it not, Puneet?
It does, yes.
Yeah. So it means transactions and business are worldly interactions in Sanskrit. Vyavahara. So he sees that people continue to do the interactions of the world, but so much of it is so mindless and so pointless. And for what? Or we look at our own behavior. How much of it is so repetitive? If you got upset this past week, I asked, tell us the first time you've had this feeling. Don't you find it boring? Why? What is it about human business, human interaction that seems so pointless? Yet we all keep doing it. Next one.
Aho yathan dhanugato yandha sheshti tadrishaha lokasya vyavaharo vai sarvasyapya bhilakshitaha. As a blind man following another blind man moves about like him, the affairs of the entire world are also selected likewise.
So we see this today in our politics. God bless the president. I hope he fully recovers from his disease. But he somehow decided to make COVID mitigation a political issue. The end result, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not doing social distancing. It's a big hoax. And now, what is the latest number? Over 30 people in our highest government are infected with COVID. The blind leading the blind. We follow what everyone else does. Whatever's fashionable. I can remember, God, it has to be a couple years ago. I had a bunch of students and they were all talking about cryptocurrency. They were all going to get rich with cryptocurrency. Nobody seems to talk about cryptocurrency anymore. Two people I knew both lost money on it. But we just follow one another. Stupid things, thinking something in the world some person, place, thing, or condition. That's what's going to make me happy. The blind leading the blind. Next one.
Nidarshanam hyatmakritira me sarvatha bhavet nunam mama shaishva vekim jatam tanme na bhavitam. In this manner, my own deeds would indeed be an example in every way. Surely what happened in my childhood is not thought of by me.
So we see how the things that are important at one time in our life are just meaningless at another. Did you have a favorite red wagon? Or maybe a stick pony? Or perhaps a doll that was your favorite doll? And then where does your desire and cherishing of them go? Or those painful heartthrobs we have as teenagers? The obsession that we have. Where does that go? Even in the realm of things like money and business and cars, it's important at one time in our life. At another level, you have different values. We have different values. So we see, looking back on our lives, there's no constancy even in what we go after. Going on.
Kaumare chanyatha vrittam tarunyepi tatonyatha idanim anyathaivasti vyaparo mama sarvatha. The conduct was otherwise in boyhood and even in youth. It was in a different manner. Now my occupation is certainly otherwise in every way.
So again, he's continuing to riff on that idea that what he does and what he considers important changes as he's gotten older. Going on.
Kimabhuta phala me tesham tanna vedri kathanchana yadhyat kale yaccha kriyate yena vai samyageveti tad buddhav vafala purvakam phalam kim tatra sampraptam kena va sukhamatmanah. What result happened to all these deeds? Somehow I do not know that. Whatever is done by whomsoever in whichever time, considering that as certainly correct or proper and attended with recourse to the result, what fruit or happiness of oneself is obtained there and by whom?
What popped into my mind, I remember a particular car I really wanted, and I bought the car. I can't remember what happened to it. If it just broke down and I abandoned it, or I sold it, or whatever. I mean, it's just gone. I mean, we're going back almost 60 years, so 55 years at least. Can't even remember. And yet at the time, it was so important. Going on.
Yachapi loke phalavad vimrishya phalam hitat na phalam tadham anye punaryasmat karoti saha. Whatever is fruitful in the world, that is indeed a reward, not having investigated it. I do not consider that as the fruit on account of which one is engaged in action. One is again engaged in action.
So here he says it can't be a really meaningful fruit if I have to repeat it. And of course, Swamiji's greatest example of this is when he would say, if sex were satisfying, we'd only do it once. I was talking with a young man over the weekend, and I can remember he had just graduated from Cal, and he was driving Uber, his first job out of college. And he's in research biology, I think. Works in a lab now. So he got his first job as research assistant 2. He's 25. Oh, he was so excited. Now he comes and complains to me that he does all the work that his manager's supposed to do, and his manager makes all this money that he's completely unsatisfied at a job that he just was so grateful to have gotten a year ago. Such is the human mind. Such is the human mind. Can we say that it's a real good if all it does is make us hungrier? Going on.
Prapte phale phalechhavan punarbhuyat katham vada yasmad nityam karotyeva janaha sarvah phalehaya. When the result is obtained, say, how can he again be one possessed of desire for result, since every man does perform work constantly out of a desire for its result?
So we're all struggling, we're all working to get what we want. And it's bad economy. It's 95 cents worth of work for a nickel's worth of pleasure. And then it's gone. And you've got to start working again to get the next fruit of action, to hopefully just get a little juice. And the whole world keeps doing it. Not realizing how insane it is. Going on.
Phalam tadeva sampraktam dukkhani sukham cha va kartavya sheshino dukkha nasho va sukhameva va. Only that is called the fruit, where there is happiness or absence of sorrow. Where there is the remainder of tasks to be done, there is neither the disappearance of sorrow nor happiness.
So we can't really call it happiness, even if you get what you want, if longing remains behind. And here is probably a good place for us to examine what I call the pleasure principle. Yoga asks us, what does it feel like to want something you don't have? Now I'm going to set disease and body pain aside for now. We're just talking about wanting something you don't have. Yoga says there is no other suffering than wanting something you don't have, or its inverse, I want to get rid of something I don't like, or the neurotic form of it, I have what I want, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. And then what Parashurama is talking about here is how crazy it is. So you want ice cream. So you go to the freezer and you get yourself some ice cream. While you're eating ice cream, you're watching television, so you're not really present to the ice cream. And then you're worrying about work tomorrow. So the ice cream doesn't even satisfy you because you're not present to the ice cream. Because all sorts of more desire comes up. When we do satisfy a desire, we get a momentary little taste. And then my mind's off to the races again. More, 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 more. So we are tyrannized by the slave master of obligatory work. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, more, better, different. So this is what Parashurama is beginning to understand. So his sattvic mind is beginning to see. This is viveka. He's being able to see what's going on, to investigate, vicharana. He's investigating the world. Next one.
Kartavya taiva dukkhanam paramam dukkhamuchyate tatsatve tu katham testo dukkha bhava sukham cha va. The state of having tasks to be done is alone declared as declared as the greatest of sorrows. When that exists, how do the two, happiness and absence of sorrow, arise?
So if I have this idea of I've got to do stuff, then at best I get a little bit of happiness when I get what I want, but it's completely temporary. Then I have sorrow. If I don't get what I want, I have sorrow. If I get what I want and it lasts for a while, then I lose it, sorrow. So as long as I'm operating in the world, what we call as a bhogi, bhogi practices bhoga. A bhogi wants to be happy. So he or she practices bhoga, which is the attempt to find happiness by satisfying as many desires as possible. And the end result is more desire and more unhappiness. Now, a yogi practices yoga. He or she also wants to be happy, but they engage in a way of life that reduces the number of desires. Because in the end, it's the mind freed from the tyranny of craving that's at peace. Next one.
Yatha dagdhakhilangasya pade patiralepanam tatha kartavya sheshasya sukhalabha ihochyate. As the anointing of sandals on the legs of a person whose entire body has been burned is so, the acquisition of happiness here is declared for a person having residual obligation.
So as long as you are kartavya, you have obligatory actions that I'm the doer. Even if you get a little bit of happiness, he says it's like a person who's been in a fire and you put a little bit of sandalwood on them. Yeah. Or Shankara's very famous image, it's like a person at a banquet with a thorn in their throat. I want. Jim, I want. So painful. Next one.
Yatha sharaviddha hriddah parishvangoप्यसागणैः तथा कर्तव्यशेषस्य सुखलाभ ihochyate. As the embrace by a multitude of celestial damsels of a person whose heart has been pierced by an arrow is, so the acquisition of happiness here is declared for a person having residual obligations.
So our modern example is you go to the local, I don't know what they even have, the bathhouses, the Playboy Club. There's all these celestial damsels. But if you've got a bullet wound in your shoulder, it isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. That's the metaphor. Next one.
Yatha shayamaya vishtan prasya gita sanshrutihi tatha kartavya sheshasya sukhalabha ihochyate. As the praisings by songs of a man overcome by the disease of consumption is, so the acquisition of happiness here is declared for a person having residual obligations.
Yes. So here, if you have consumption, tuberculosis, we could say you've got COVID pneumonia. You're lying there and you can't breathe. So somebody comes and sings songs to you. It's not going to do much good. So it is with the person under the tyranny of compulsory action because of the phenomenon of craving. Going on.
Sukhi naste hi lokeshu ye kartavyataya sthitaha purnashaya mahatmanaha sarvadeha shushitalaha. They are happy in the worlds who remain in the state of having no obligatory tasks. They are noble souls with fulfilled hearts, calm in their entire body and mind.
Yes, so there are great sages and ordinary people who are freed from this compulsion to act to get what I want, who are content, whose minds are cool, shitala. How do they get that way? What is it that frees them from the tyranny of obligatory actions? Next one.
Yadi kartavya sheshepi sukham syat kenachit kvachit shula protepi cha nare syat sukham gandhamalyajam. Even when there is a remainder of obligatory tasks, if there can be happiness by something somewhere, then there would be then there would be the happiness born of perfumes and garlands, even in a man pierced by a spear.
So, if you could find happiness while there was still an obligatory task, it would be like garlands being able to please someone who's wounded. So he's saying that's the ultimate tyranny. I'll be happy when, it will be better if. Now, I'm going to draw on one of my favorite images that comes from another great text, Yoga Vasishta. Yoga Vasishta describes the mind, describes samsara, describes the world as having as its root, as its base, simply three ideas. The first is jiva bhavana, the attitude or the feeling that I'm a person. The second is some goal, and that goal only takes one of two forms. I either need to change the world or I need to change me. And the third is this obligatory action, this need to struggle, to go from point A to point B. Ram Dass used to say, be here now. But the man in ignorance, the woman in ignorance says, I need to be there then. Now's not enough. So this is the same idea. As long as I need to go someplace, get something, I'm tyrannized. Now, you can't turn your craving off like a light switch. Oh, that it was that easy. Nor can it really be done through willpower. How can we be free from it? Well, the Tattriya will get into that. Going on.
Aho mahachitrametat kartavya shatasankule sukham statiha yasyarthe karotyeva sadajanaha. Alas, this is a great wonder that there is happiness in this world crowded with hundreds of obligatory tasks for whose sake man surely works always.
So it's amazing that anybody gets any happiness or joy at all. Everybody is, as Hamlet says, grunting and sweating under a weary life. Or as that old song, Old Man Rivers says, I gets weary and tired of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. That's our lives. Going on.
Aho vichara mahatmayam kim vadami nrinamaham ananta kartava shaila kranta saukhyam labhanti cha. What shall I say of the greatness of absence of investigation of men? Pressed by mountains of endless obligatory tasks, they obtain happiness also.
So here, all these people are chasing after a little bit of juice, thinking it's going to give them something meaningful. And it's all from lack of investigation, vichara. Lack of investigation. Going on.
Yatha saukyaya yatyate sarvabhausmatu sarvada tathaiva yatate nityam api bhrishtatane rataha. As an emperor strives always for happiness, exactly so, one who is engaged in wandering about begging for alms also strives constantly.
So, whose effort is greater and whose reward is better? Say, the rich person who wants to close $1 billion deal, or the street person who wants a couple bucks for a bottle of wine? If the billionaire who wants to close the deal doesn't close it and really needs it, he grieves. And if the street person gets a $20 bill, he's quite overjoyed. So the constant factor of the human condition and ignorance is suffering. That was the Buddha's first noble truth, his first teaching, his first turning of the wheel of Dharma to the Four Noble Truths. The first one, the truth of dukkha, suffering. Life, the way most people live it, is full of suffering. Noble truth number 2, the cause of suffering is kama, desire, craving, trishna, thirsting, spriha, longing. This is the truth that Parashurama, through his paying attention, he can only pay attention now because his mind is pure, because he's been doing his upasana for 12 years. Next one.
Prithak tau prapnutah saukhyam manyete kritakrityatam tadhyena yanti sarvepi yamyaham tana nakrumat analocha phalam chapi yathandhyo dhyanugachyatha. They obtain happiness separately and imagine the accomplishments of their objects. Consequently, without pondering over even the result, as a blind person follows another blind person, I follow those paths by which all people go.
So again, people follow what they think will bring them happiness. And as the Western form of the saying goes, the blind leading the blind, and they both fall into the ditch. So you and I think this is going to make me happy, that's going to make me happy. And then we're unwilling to tell the truth to ourselves. That didn't work out very well. We may go to a cocktail party and tell everybody, oh, I went to Switzerland on my vacation, and oh, I bought a new house, and I've got a new car. But look inside your own heart. How's it working out for you? Punit, it's now 8:30, but I think we're almost to the end of the chapter, are we not?
No, we have like 16 more verses.
Okay, we'll finish it up then next week. What verse are we on?
We finished 52. We are going to 52a. We're going to do 52b next time.
Okay. All right, so we have some time now for questions. I hope this has totally depressed all of you. That's its intention. Any questions? Any comments, any insights?
Jim, I didn't have a question, but I just had a comment or an insight. Very recently, having gotten a puppy at home, and I see the way the puppy goes after chew toys, and I think that our condition is not very different. That you always need a chew toy to keep yourself sort of engaged in the world, and you don't know what to do when you don't have a chew toy.
Well, I think the puppy's probably a little smarter than you and me.
I'm
Because
sure
if you take the chew toy away from the puppy, it may be disappointed for a moment, but it can drop it and forget it.
Right.
You and I go in the corner and feel angry and resentful and bitter that we don't have the chew toy. That's one of the wonderful things about dogs, is they may not have great memories, but they've got great forgetteries. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can scream and yell at your dog because you've just had a bad day, and the dog may be frightened, but 10 minutes later, it doesn't hold a resentment. Unless it's a poodle. Poodles have poodle food. They do remember and hold it. No, very good point. Very good point. Very good. But must we always have chew toys? That's the next question. And what yoga says is, actually, no. You can enjoy a chew toy if it comes along. But we learned that Atmaramana, the mind reveling, abiding in the self, is what really satisfies the mind.
I think that goes back to what you said a little while earlier of the Jiva Bhavana. The reason I see a chew toy is because I see the world different from me, which can happen only because of the Jiva Bhavana.
And technically speaking, what we do is engage in what's called anyonya adhyas, mutual superimposition. I superimpose upon myself the qualities of the not self. I'm tall, I'm short, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm successful, I'm a failure, I'm loving, I'm not loving, I'm happy, I'm sad. But then I superimpose upon the world the qualities of the self. Out there is Sat, existence, separate from me. Out there is Chit, sentience. My spouse or my boyfriend or girlfriend, oh, you are so wonderful. And most importantly, I project my ananda out there. Well, you got it. That's exactly what happens. Very good insight. Very good insight. Anyone else? Now, from the standpoint of practice, the ruthless rule of the mind is the mind will pursue whatever experience has given it the greatest juice, the greatest joy. No help for it. Thank God, God is the most beloved. Or to do it from a non-dual sense, thank God, your Swarup, Chidananda Rupaham, Shivoham, Shivoham. Because once the yogi starts to develop the trick of being able to absorb the mind and the self independent of the world, and can revel in that bliss, that's what pulls the mind out of the world. Now, in the end, we have to give up the bliss of samadhi as well. But you can't renounce something you haven't got. Swami Tejamayananda used to say, I renounce being president of the United States this morning. That's foolishness. You were never president. So get deeply rooted in that self-abidance. And now even give back. So if you don't have a meditative practice, you're foolish, because that's what allows us to have these actual experience of a non-mediated experience of the bliss of myself. I'm not using a medium like some object, some situation, some person. It's just myself. And even if just once you go into a deep meditation, thunder of silence, and taste that bliss of the self, your mind will never forget it. And you're going to want to find a way to return to that. This strengthens our mumukshutva. That's part of the process.